I've always loved Christmas. The lights, the snow, that whole soft, sparkling feeling. It used to be my favorite time of year. After what happened on Christmas Eve 2018, I don't think I'll ever look at holiday decorations the same way again. I was 23 then, still living with my parents in a quiet Ohio suburb. They decided to take a Christmas cruise, which meant I had the house to myself. I wasn't complaining. My grand plan was to game all night, demolish a pizza, and enjoy the rare piece of a drama-free holiday. Around 6, I ordered the pizza. Outside it was already dark, light snow drifting down since afternoon. I sat in the front living room, which faces the street, keeping an eye out for the delivery car. Our front porch is big, and my mom is obsessed with decorating it. Lights wrapped around every pillar, wreaths on all the windows, plastic reindeer marching across the lawn. But that night, there was one decoration I didn't recognize. While scanning the street for headlights, I noticed a shape sitting on the wooden bench on the porch. A full-sized Santa. It sat motionless facing the street. I frowned. I was pretty sure it hadn't been there when I'd come home from work. Maybe my mom had bought it last minute and asked a neighbor to set it up. Or maybe I just walked past it without seeing. It didn't look expensive. Bright red velvety suit, but the face was that hard, shiny plastic older decorations have. Rigid white beard, black boots. Arms resting on the bench's armrests, empty eyes staring out over the yard. A few minutes later, the delivery car pulled into the driveway. I grabbed my wallet and opened the front door. Cold air slapped me in the face as I stepped out. To meet the driver, I had to walk right past the Santa. Up close, it was worse. The figure slumped a little to the left and seemed big, thicker than the wireframe things my mom usually bought. I didn't touch it, just eyed it as I handed over cash and took the boxes. "Nice decoration," the driver said, nodding toward the bench. "Scared me when I walked up." "Yeah," I said, "my mom lives for this stuff." Inside, I locked the door and ate while I played. I tried to get absorbed in the game, but that Santa kept creeping into my thoughts. The way it sat there, too heavy, too real. Around 9, the wind started howling. Something slammed hard against the front wall. I muted the TV and listened. It sounded like something had toppled over on the porch. I went to the window and parted the blinds. The Santa was no longer on the bench. I scanned the porch until I saw it, lying face down on the boards, directly in front of the door. The wind must have knocked it over, I thought. Annoyed at having to go out in the cold but not wanting it to blow into the driveway, I unlocked the door and stepped out in my socks. "Stupid thing," I muttered. I bent to grab it by the shoulder and haul it upright. The instant my hand closed on the red fabric, my stomach dropped. It didn't feel like hollow plastic or metal frame. It felt like thick winter cloth over a solid body, like I had just grabbed someone's coat. Before my brain could catch up, the figure tensed. A low, animal growl rumbled out from under the mask. I screamed and flailed backward, sliding on the damp boards. Santa surged to his feet with terrifying speed. No stiff, jerky motions, just a smooth, violent lunge. The plastic Santa face was still strapped over his real one, that stupid molded grin looking right at me. Behind the eye holes, real eyes stared wide, frantic. He launched himself at me. I threw my weight back into the house and slammed the door just as he crashed into it. The wood shuddered. My hands shook so hard I almost missed the deadbolt, but I got it turned just as the knob began to rattle and twist. "Open the door." A deep, muffled voice boomed from the other side. "Open up or I'll break it down." I didn't answer. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife in the block, and bolted upstairs to my parents' room. I locked that door too and crouched in the corner, calling 911 with shaking fingers. "There's a man on my porch," I whispered to the operator. "He was dressed like a decoration. He's trying to get in." While I was still on the line, glass shattered downstairs, the small pane in the front door. I heard the lock click. He was inside. My heart slammed so hard my vision blurred. Heavy, wet boots thudded across the entryway hardwood. "Hello," he called, voice sing-song now. "I just want to give you a present." I stayed silent, tears running down my face. The operator told me to stay on the line, that officers were 2 minutes away. His footsteps moved into the living room, the kitchen. He was searching. Then the staircase creaked. He was coming up. Slow, deliberate steps. I watched the thin line of light under the bedroom door. A shadow blocked it. The knob twisted, testing. It stopped against the lock. Then the pounding began. He hurled his weight against the door. The frame cracked. "I know you're in there," he screamed. Just as the wood started to splinter, sirens screamed in the distance, growing rapidly louder. The pounding stopped. Bootsteps pounded down the hall, then hammered down the stairs. A moment later, I heard the back door slam. I stayed huddled in that corner for another 10 minutes until the dispatcher said officers were there, and it was safe to come out. Downstairs, icy air knifed through the house. The front door's glass was smashed, snow melting on the floor. They didn't find him. What they did find, 2 blocks away in a drainage ditch, was the Santa outfit, jacket, pants, and that awful mask. The suit had been stolen from a local hardware store's holiday display 2 days earlier. The cops figured he'd been using it to case houses, sitting motionless on porches, watching for signs of life while looking like just another decoration to passing cars. If I hadn't gone out to move him, he might have waited for me to fall asleep and then broken in quietly. They never caught him. I moved out a few months later. Before the next story, the channel did the usual bit about subscribing and turning on the bell so you don't miss future horror uploads. What came next happened in the summer of 2015. I'm 29 now. Back then I was 19 and working at a Chick-fil-A in Reno, Nevada. It was fine for high school, but I wanted more. So when I landed a well-paid job in San Francisco, I was over the moon. My orientation was on a Friday. I decided to drive down Thursday, stay in a cheap Airbnb through the weekend, and get a feel for the city before moving. I left Reno that Thursday afternoon. Everything was normal until I got deep into the mountains along I-80, an hour out, just road, rock, and trees. I glanced at my dashboard and felt my stomach flip. The gas light was on. I checked my GPS. The next reliable station was about 30 miles away. I cursed myself for not filling up. I watched the needle sink below empty and knew there was no way I'd make 30 miles. An exit sign appeared ahead. Not a city exit, just one of those nameless ramps that feed into a narrow forest road. I took it. I figured there had to be a farmhouse, a little local pump, something. About 6 miles from the interstate, the engine coughed, the steering went heavy, and the car rolled to a stop on the shoulder. Silence. Tall pines, wind in the branches. I grabbed my phone. No bars, no service at all. I sat there gripping the wheel, forcing myself not to freak out. 10 minutes later, a car appeared in my rearview mirror. It slowed and pulled up beside me, driver's window to driver's window. An ocean gray Nissan Altima. Relief washed over me. Finally, someone. The Nissan idled inches from my door. The driver didn't roll his window down. He didn't gesture, just sat there. 1 minute, 2. Long enough that the relief curdled into unease. Why stop if you're not going to say anything? I cracked my own window. "Hey, you okay?" I called. "Do you need help?" Slowly, he turned his head toward me. His eyes were bloodshot and wide, ringed in dark circles as if he'd been awake for days. His jaw clenched and unclenched. His skin had that sweaty, stretched look you see on people high on something nasty. He didn't answer. He just stared at me with an intensity that felt like being measured. I rolled my window up fast. He opened his door. He stepped out tall, wearing grimy clothes dusted with something like drywall. He didn't approach my car. He turned his back to me and walked straight into the trees. No glance back, no words, just vanished into the tree line. Was this a setup? Was someone else waiting in the woods? I thought about getting out and heading for a house I'd passed a mile back, but then I remembered something. When I'd bought the car, my dad had put a small emergency gas can in the trunk. I'd completely forgotten. I popped the trunk, grabbed the red can with shaking hands, and started pouring. My gaze kept jerking toward the woods, expecting him, or someone else, to come charging out. As soon as the can was empty, I tossed it back in the trunk, dove into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered once, then it caught. I floored it. I didn't look back. I flew down that road and back onto I-80, then pushed well over the limit until I saw a bright, busy station. Families, truckers, kids, people. I finally exhaled. I filled the tank completely, used the restroom, then grabbed snacks just to calm my nerves. Walking back to the car, I ripped open a bag of chips. As I reached for my door handle, something in my peripheral vision froze me. 2 pumps over sat a gray Nissan Altima. I told myself it was coincidence. Popular car, lots of gray Nissans. Then I saw the passenger door, a big, distinctive smear of blue paint like it had scraped a pole. It was the same car. My heart slammed into my throat. I didn't look to see if he was around. I jumped into my car, started it, and peeled out onto the highway. I checked my mirrors constantly. For 20 minutes, nothing. Then I saw it, the gray Altima with the blue streak, weaving through traffic to get closer. I was nearing Sacramento. I tried to drive normally, hoping he'd pass. He didn't. He tucked in behind me and stayed there. I decided to try losing him. I took an exit, made 3 random rights and a left, and looped back onto the freeway a few miles later. Once in the city area, traffic thickened. I checked again. He was still there, 4 cars back now. Then 3. I spotted a police cruiser near him and felt a flicker of hope until the Altima sped up. He cut across 2 lanes, aggressive, and swung in right behind my bumper. Then he rammed me. My car lurched. I fought the wheel, barely keeping it straight. In the mirror, I watched the Altima swerve wildly. He lost control, spun across the lanes, and smashed head-on into a metal exit sign on the shoulder. Steam poured from under his hood. The police cruiser's lights popped on instantly. I pulled onto the shoulder, shaking. The officer ran to the Altima with his gun drawn. More units and an ambulance showed up fast. I gave my statement, the breakdown in the woods, the gas station, the tailing, the hit. The driver wasn't badly injured. He stumbled out, shouting that he'd just fallen asleep at the wheel. None of us bought it. People don't shadow you for 50 miles and then fall asleep into your bumper. The cops searched his car before towing it. One came over to me looking grim. They'd found a loaded semi-automatic rifle on the passenger seat, covered by a jacket. While they were cuffing him, he started screaming at me. "You're lucky the cops are here," and similar threats. He claimed the rifle was for hunting, even though it wasn't hunting season, and he was headed towards San Francisco. They booked him on reckless driving, disorderly conduct, and weapons charges. I got past it eventually, but it took a long time before I felt okay driving long distances alone again. My family actually moved to San Francisco a few years later, so at least now I'm not alone out here. I still don't know what he had in mind, but knowing that rifle sat next to him the whole time he followed me makes it pretty clear how lucky I am to be telling this story at all. This next one happened sometime in the late 80s or early 90s, when I was 6 or 7. My sister was 14 or 15. We grew up in one of those dusty West Texas towns where the land is flat forever and everyone swears they know everyone. People left their doors unlocked because nothing ever happens here. That night, our parents were out. I don't remember why, maybe a town meeting, maybe dinner, but my sister babysitting me was normal. We got along. The age gap helped. I was just the kid she had to keep alive until Mom and Dad came back. It was winter. If you've never been in the high desert at night, you don't realize how brutal it gets. By 8 it was pitch black, and the wind howled like always, rattling siding and whining through every crack in the windows. We were in the common room where the big TV was, watching one of those gritty CBS news magazines, 48 hours, maybe hard copy. Real crimes dressed up like horror movies, kidnappings, murders, trafficking. That night's story hit a nerve. It was about a quiet man in a nice suburb who snapped and attacked his next-door neighbors, kidnapping their young daughter. Sitting there as a kid, in a dark house listening to West Texas wind. Something about your neighbor turning into a monster made our own living room feel fragile. To get why what happened next was so terrifying, you have to picture the layout. The common room had a full wall of floor-to-ceiling glass, including a big sliding door to the backyard. With no porch light on, that whole wall was a black mirror. Inside, all you saw was your reflection. Outside, you could see in. Opposite that was the entryway and our solid wooden front door, with a heavy glass storm door mounted outside it. About 45 minutes into the show, the narrator was talking about an ongoing manhunt, dragging out the suspense. The house was quiet except for the TV and the wind. Then 3 thunderous bangs slammed into the front door. Not knocks, blows like fists or boots trying to break through. My sister and I both leapt off the floor and screamed. Pure reflex. Then silence. We stood there, hearts hammering. The only light came from the TV and a faint yellow glow at the end of the hall from the kitchen. It was probably just the wind, my sister whispered, though her voice shook. Around there, the wind could absolutely hurl heavy things into the house. We had a big rocking chair and clay pots on the porch. It made sense, sort of. We stayed frozen for a minute or two, adrenaline ebbing, convincing ourselves something had just blown over. We were just about to sit back down when a new sound iced my spine. The slow, soft hiss clunk of the storm door's hydraulic closer. The wind can slam a door. It cannot open a storm door, hold it open while something hammers on the wood underneath, then let it shut on its own. Someone had been right there, inches away, only the wooden door between us. We stood in the center of the room, rooted to the carpet. We knew someone was out there. We knew they just tried the front door and found it locked. My sister dropped to her knees and crawled to the TV. It was an old set with metal knobs. She reached up and clicked it off. The room plunged into near darkness. Only the dim kitchen light spilled in from the hall. I knelt too, shaking. She crouched next to the blank TV. We'd exchange wide-eyed glances and then stare at the front door, waiting for the knob to turn, for the wood to crack. The next noise didn't come from there. I was facing the glass wall. I saw something move. The brass knob on the back sliding door began to turn. Slow, intentional. The metal rotated, hit the lock, and jiggled lightly, as if whoever was out there was gently testing it, hoping it was open. My throat closed. I couldn't make a sound. Then the gentle testing stopped, and all at once the force started. The handle jerked violently back and forth. The entire glass wall shook in its frame. From where I sat in the dark, with a sliver of light behind me from the kitchen, I could see my reflection and the rooms, warping in and out with every violent yank. My sister finally broke. She screamed like someone being killed. I was still locked in place. She didn't leave me. She scrambled over, grabbed my arm, and hauled me across the floor. "Go, go," she hissed. We sprinted down the hall and into her bedroom. She slammed the door and locked it, then started barricading. Desk, chair, hamper, anything heavy. Finally, she heaved her mattress off the frame and shoved it against the door. She grabbed the cordless phone on her nightstand, the beige kind with the metal antenna you had to pull up, and fumbled with the buttons. Back then, you couldn't always rely on 911 in our area. You had to know the sheriff's 7-digit number. In her panic, she blanked. She just hit redial. It rang twice and a girl answered. Her best friend. "Hello, someone is breaking in," my sister screamed, sobbing. "You have to get here. Get your dad. Someone is trying to get into our house right now." I remember being stunned to hear her swear. I'd never heard her say the F word. It made everything feel frighteningly real. I crouched in the corner, hugging my knees so hard my muscles hurt, teeth chattering. We sat in the dark behind the mattress, listening. No glass breaking, no footsteps, just wind. It felt like hours. It was probably 10 minutes. Headlights finally swept across the bedroom window. "A car," my sister breathed. She peeked through the blinds. "It's them." Her friend's parents had flown over. We heard car doors slam and her friend's dad shouting. We shoved the mattress aside and ran out. He stalked the front yard with a tire iron, scanning shadows. The police arrived soon after. They circled the house with big flashlights. The ground was frozen solid, no footprints. At the back glass door, though, they found fresh marks along the bottom frame. Scrapes, like someone had been kicking while yanking the handle. Whoever it was had tried the front door, found it locked, circled to the back, seen us by the TV in the dim light and tried to force their way in. When we screamed and ran, they must have realized the element of surprise was gone and vanished into the dark. Nothing like that ever happened to us again. I worked at a gas station in a tiny Ohio town for about 4 years. One stoplight, one school, and cornfields in every direction. I usually volunteered for nights. Most people hated it, I didn't mind. It was mostly dead time, sit behind the counter, flip through magazines, scroll my phone. Perfect for a night owl. One Tuesday in late October is burned into my memory. My shift started at 7. The sky was already black, canopy lights buzzing. My coworker Dave showed me the till, grabbed his keys, and headed out. Later, try not to fall asleep, he joked as the door chimed. Our door chime was ancient and obnoxious, a piercing ring loud enough to wake the dead. There was no way anyone could walk in or out without you hearing it anywhere in the store. Once Dave's taillights disappeared down the road, I locked the back office door like we were supposed to and settled onto the stool. 7 to 8 came and went. Nobody. I straightened cigarettes, wiped the counter, then just sat there. 8 to 9. Still nothing. Not unheard of on a Tuesday, but usually you'd get at least one late-night smoker or gas customer. The only sounds were the Slurpee machine and the occasional car drifting past on the highway. By 10, I'd been there 3 hours and was bored out of my mind, doom-scrolling Twitter, barely glancing up because I knew the chime would warn me if anyone came in. Then a crash exploded from the back of the store. I jolted so hard I almost dropped my phone. My heart spiked. I looked toward the restrooms. The men's bathroom door slammed open so hard the knob punched a hole in the drywall. A man staggered out, then bolted, boots skidding on tile. He was big, maybe 62, wearing a filthy flannel shirt and jeans dusted white. My brain sputtered. The chime hadn't chimed once in 3 hours. The man stopped dead in the middle of the aisle by the chips. He was drenched in sweat, hair plastered to his forehead, chest heaving like he'd run a marathon. He slowly turned his head and looked right at me. We stared at each other for a handful of seconds that stretched forever. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild, not drunk, cornered. Hey, I managed, voice cracking. We're, closed. We weren't. Open 24/7, bright red sign and everything. Panic makes you lie. He didn't answer, just made a guttural sound and took off. He sprinted for the front door and slammed into the push bar hard enough to rattle the glass. The chime finally screamed as he burst out, vanishing around the side of the building toward the dark fields. I shook all over. The clock read 10:15. I grabbed the landline, intending to call the cops, then faltered. What was I going to report? A guy ran out of our bathroom. Then the obvious clicked and my stomach turned. I'd been there since 7. The door chime had never rung, which meant he'd gone into that bathroom before my shift started. He'd been in there for more than 3 hours. What was he doing? I took the heavy metal flashlight from under the counter and walked slowly to the back. The air felt wrong. The men's room door still stood open. I approached carefully. "Hello," I called. Silence. I stepped in. The motion light buzzed on. It was a simple bathroom sink toilet. It smelled like old urine and something sharper, metallic. The toilet seat was down, the sink bone dry. Then I looked at the floor. White dust coated the tiles. I tilted my head back. Several ceiling tiles above the toilet had been pushed aside, leaving a dark hole into the crawl space. 2 muddy boot prints stamped the toilet tank. He hadn't been sitting on the toilet. He'd been in the ceiling. On the floor, near where someone would land if they dropped from that opening, lay a long, serrated hunting knife. Rusted, but honed sharp. I ran for the front, locked the doors, and called 911. The cops searched the crawl space. They found a sleeping bag on the insulation, some empty water bottles, and a tiny hole bored through the ceiling tile directly above the cash register. The officer told me whoever it was had probably been living up there about a week. watching the cashiers from above, dropping down when the coast was clear to steal food or whatever else he had in mind. The worst part was what they found by the sleeping bag, a notebook. Inside were dates and notes. Monday, girl with red hair leaves 11 p.m. Tuesday, old guy leaves 10 p.m. the last line, in shaky handwriting. Tuesday, new kid sleeps at 2 a.m. Do it then. The reason he'd crashed out of the bathroom wasn't confusion. It was bad luck. They found a cracked support beam up there. He'd been positioning himself to drop silently behind me, but the beam broke. He fell into the bathroom, made a racket, and had to bolt. If that beam hadn't snapped, he would have waited until 2 a.m. That's when I usually took a nap. I quit the next morning. I haven't worked a night shift since. People warn you to be careful with online strangers, catfish, scams, creeps. No one warns you about the person who looks perfect, the shy, sweet girl who just wants a roommate. I was new to the city, broke and lonely. That's why I was on the roommate app. I wasn't hunting for a date, just someone halfway normal to split rent with. That's how I met Bea. Her profile was almost aggressively wholesome. Country hat, big smile, golden retriever at her side. She had a room in a big family house for $400 a week. In this market, that sounded impossible. We matched, chatted. She felt instantly like the sister I never had. When I moved in, everything felt right. The house was huge, older two-story with thick walls. She told me her family owned a nightclub downtown. They worked nights and slept days. Translation: we'd have the place to ourselves most evenings. She was friendly, neat, constantly helpful. For the first few weeks we were inseparable. Looking back, it wasn't friendship. It was grooming. The first red flags were subtle. She didn't just compliment my clothes, she duplicated them. Same shirts, same jeans. Then she dyed her hair the exact shade of brown as mine. When I joked about it, she grinned. Twins. Then the control started. Not boyfriend-style jealousy, something darker. She wanted me as a project, a possession. Her family, her mom and brother were ghosts. I never saw them. I only heard them, mainly the mother. If I didn't clean the kitchen exactly right, or if I mentioned going out with my friend Jim, Bea's expression would change. Her eyes would flick upward. Then a voice would shriek through the floor. She's been bad, B. She needs to be punished. Don't let her leave. The sound was raspy and furious, like an old woman with a cigarette habit. Afterward, B would come downstairs looking upset but composed. Mother's not happy, she'd say. You shouldn't have gone out, you know how she is. The house slowly became a cage. They made me install Life 360 on my phone for safety. If I went to the park, my phone would buzz. Mother says come home now. I started losing weight. Mother doesn't want you in the kitchen, B said, so she did all the cooking. My portions shrank to tiny bowls. Pigeon food, she'd say cheerfully, eating full meals herself. If I complained, she'd remind me I was lucky to pay such low rent to such a loving family. I was literally paying to be monitored and starved. One day, she told me about a girl named May. According to her, May was a crazy stalker who used to live there but got kicked out for stealing. If I ever saw a girl outside near the house, she warned, I should call the cops immediately. She showed me a blurry photo. May looked disturbingly like me. The breaking point was the party. B insisted I come help at the club to make up for being difficult. I went. She kept handing me sodas. I don't remember drinking any alcohol, but the room spun. My limbs turned to lead. My thoughts fuzzed out. I felt drugged, not drunk. I managed to stumble away where a couple, Amy and Jake, noticed I was barely upright. I slurred that I needed to go home. They drove me. I staggered into my room and collapsed. When I woke, sunlight knifed through the blinds. My skull pounded. My phone showed 50 missed calls from B. Her texts read, unlock the door. Mother's coming in. You can't leave me. The house was silent. I crept into the hall needing water. The corridor was dim. As I passed Mother's room, I saw something new. The door, usually rigidly locked, was cracked open. My heart hammered. I knew I shouldn't look. Curiosity won. I pushed the door open. No mother. Dust filmed everything. No bed, no dresser, no clothes. Just a single wooden chair in the center of the room. On a small table beside it sat an expensive microphone setup wired into a tangle of equipment running into the walls. There was no family. We lived alone. The voices, the shrieking mother, the angry brother had all been her, sitting in that chair putting on a one-woman show. My stomach turned. I backed toward the hall, then noticed a stack of mail on the floor by the closet. Every envelope was addressed to May. I opened the closet. May had not moved out. Her driver's license lay on top of a pile of clothes, purse, phone, everything coated in stiff, brownish stains. I thought it was makeup at first. Then the smell hit me. Blood. The front door lock clicked downstairs. My veins went to ice. I heard boots, heavy country boots, thumping up the stairs fast. "I know you're in there," Bea called, voice bright and sing-song. Then she shifted. Her tone dropped into the harsh, rasping mother voice. "She's been bad, hasn't she, Bea?" She went into the mother's room. I didn't hesitate. I didn't look for a hiding place. I grabbed the heavy lamp from the hallway table and smashed the nearest window. "What are you doing?" she screamed, back in her own voice. I climbed out onto the roof. It was a 2-story drop to the yard. I didn't look down, I jumped. Pain like fire exploded up my leg as my ankle snapped. I shrieked, but somehow got up. Half crawling, half limping, I made it to the street. I didn't stop until I flagged down a police car. I told them everything, about the room, the mic, the closet. They raided the house. They found her in the mother's room, switching between voices, talking to herself. They found May in the basement, buried in the dirt floor. She'd been missing for 6 months. The police told me she had been disciplined by her mother. I was next in line. So to the sweet country girl with the imaginary family and the chorus of voices in her head. Let's never cross paths again. I was 16 when this next one happened. Another Christmas Eve in another isolated house. A heavy winter storm was beating down. Snow so thick you could barely see the streetlights. We lived on the edge of a neighborhood, almost surrounded by trees and fields. Inside, everything was perfect. Lights off except for the Christmas tree and the fireplace. Soft music. Eggnog. I just started opening my stocking presents with my parents. Then the front door shook under a volley of brutal knocks. Not neighborly taps. It sounded like someone was swinging a hammer into the wood. The vibrations ran through the floor. We froze. My dad stood up, face going serious, and gestured for my mom and me to stay put. We had a big bay window looking onto the porch. He parted the curtains, expecting maybe a late delivery or a stranded driver. "There's no one there," he said, confused. He flipped the porch light and undid the deadbolt. He cracked the door, bracing himself. The porch was empty. Wind howled, blowing snow in. He looked down. A black cat lay half over the threshold, shivering and half frozen. He was in terrible shape, fur matted with blood, looking like he'd gone through a shredder. We looked past him at the yard. Snow had been falling hard for hours. The layer on the porch and walkway was pristine. No human footprints, no tire tracks. There was no way, in the 3 seconds between hearing the banging and my dad checking, that anyone could have sprinted away without leaving a mark. Even if they'd thrown the cat, the snow would show it. It was as if the cat had just appeared. He let out a weak cry. We're animal people, so the mystery of the phantom knocker instantly took a backseat. "Get a towel," my dad said. We scooped him up, carried him in, and locked the door. Up close he looked worse. Young, unfixed male, deep cuts on his side and neck. Not like a car hit, like he'd fought something much bigger. We cleaned his wounds, fed him, laid a bed for him near the heater. He seemed terrified, eyes locked on the front door, hissing at empty air. A few days later, we took him to the vet. He healed fast. We already had 2 dogs who hated cats, so my mom asked her friend down the street, Mrs. Gable, if she wanted him. She said yes. They named him Shadow. For months, he settled in fine. Then one Tuesday in April, around 2 a.m., Mrs. Gable and her husband were asleep. Their kids were down the hall. Shadow usually slept at the foot of their bed. That night, he sprang onto Mrs. Gable's chest. He wasn't purring, he screamed. She told my mom later it didn't sound like a cat at all. It sounded like a woman shrieking. Long, guttural wails. He dug his claws into her chest hard enough to draw blood. She jolted upright, heart racing, thinking intruder. Then she smelled it, acrid smoke and melting plastic. She shook her husband awake. They grabbed the kids and fled. The smoke detectors started beeping just as they hit the front door. By the time they reached the lawn, the garage was a wall of flame. The fire department came quickly. It turned out to be an electrical fire in the garage wall that had spread to a car. If the cat hadn't woken them early, the fumes could easily have killed them in their sleep. The car didn't explode, but the garage was destroyed. The house survived. They renamed him Clark for Superman. He lived a long, spoiled life. But there's a detail that still bothers me. After the fire was out, the fire marshal and police walked the property, taking notes. Mrs. Gable was on a gurney getting checked for smoke inhalation. Her across-the-street neighbor came over and spoke to an officer. My mom heard about it later. The neighbor said he'd been awake with insomnia around 1:45 a.m., just before the fire. He'd looked out and seen someone standing in the Gable's driveway, staring at the garage. He assumed it was Mr. Gable. When the police examined the driveway later, the snow and ice near the garage had melted from the heat. Farther out, the ground was muddy. No footprints led up to where the figure had stood. No prints led away. Just like our porch on Christmas Eve. To this day, I don't know what or who banged on our door to dump that cat at our feet, or who stood in the driveway watching the Gable's garage burn. I don't know if that figure started the fire, or was just there to see if Clark would save another family. I've driven long haul for 6 years now. If there's one thing I know, it's that highways at night are a different planet than in daylight. I normally team drive with a co-driver. One of us drives, the other sleeps in the bunk, and we swap. The truck rarely stops. It's grueling, but you adjust to sleeping while your whole world vibrates at 70 mph. On this run, my co-driver had a death in the family and took a week off. I decided to keep the route going solo, hauling from Massachusetts back to Arizona. Driving alone meant I had to follow rules to the letter, pulling over for a 10-hour break every day instead of just swapping drivers. Approaching the Arizona-New Mexico border on a 40, my hours were nearly up. That stretch is empty, just desert and sky. I pulled into a small independent truck stop right on the line. Not a bright corporate chain. A worn mom and pop place. A chewed-up gravel lot. A dim building that looked half-closed. A few flickering sodium lights. The kind of place where you lock everything. I parked in the back row, away from the handful of other rigs. Ate some food from my cooler, then got ready to sleep. In a sleeper cab, there are 2 privacy curtains. One divides the driver's seats from the bunk. The other wraps around the inside of the windshield and side windows. When you're parked solo, you close the windshield curtain and leave the bunk one open. It makes the whole cab feel like a tiny room. That's what I did. I pulled the front curtains closed, blocking out the weak yellow light. Left the seat to bunk curtain open. Set the engine to high idle for AC, climbed into bed. Exhaustion knocked me out fast. 4 or 5 hours later, I woke up wrong. If you're used to sleeping in motion, waking up in a motionless truck messes with your head. I lay there, disoriented. Then I heard something, a steady clicking from the dashboard. At the same time, the cab pulsed with red light. My heart lurched. I knew that sound and glow instantly. My hazard lights were on. The 4-way switch is on the dash. You can't hit it by accident, it's a firm push. For them to be flashing, someone had pressed that button. Someone had been in the cab. I eased up to a sitting position, moving quietly over the engine's hum. I reached under the mattress and grabbed my tire thumper, a short, weighted wooden club. Gripping it, I peered toward the front. The hazard icon on the dash blinked on and off, casting red over the wheel, the driver's seat, the curtain. Then I noticed something else. My GPS was gone. I use a pricey trucking GPS, tablet-sized, mounted to the center of the dash with a heavy suction cup. It was always there. Now the mounting spot was empty. Panic spiked. Alone in a dark, sketchy lot while someone lowered themselves into my cab, grabbing gear and flipping switches. I took a breath, raised the club and lunged forward into the driver's seat, ready to swing at whoever might be crouched by the passenger footwell. "Get out!" I yelled. No one was there. I yanked the curtain back from the side window, expecting at least to see somebody running away. The lot was still. No figures, no cars pulling out. I checked the driver's door. Locked. Leaned across, checked the passengers. Also locked. It made no sense. How could someone get in, steal my GPS, hit my hazards, and then lock both doors from outside? I flipped on the overhead light for a better look. That's when I saw it. My GPS dangled a few inches above the floor mat, hanging by its power cord from the dashboard. I stared at it for several long seconds as the explanation fell into place. The suction cup had failed. The temperature must have dropped in the night, loosening the rubber grip. The heavy unit had fallen straight down. On its way, it had hit the hazard button squarely, turning the flashers on, then swung by the cord until it snagged. I sat there in the seat, still holding the club, listening to the click of the hazards. I reached out and pushed the button. The red pulsing stopped. Silence settled back over the cab. I grabbed the dangling GPS by its cord and tossed it onto the passenger seat. It sounds stupid telling it now. A falling gadget freaking out a grown man. But waking up in a dead, silent lot in the middle of nowhere to flashing red lights and the conviction that someone's been standing beside your bed, that fear was real. I checked the locks 3 more times before crawling back onto the bunk. I didn't sleep again that night. Every creak and gust of wind jolted me awake. I finished the drive to Arizona the next day on coffee and adrenaline. I still drive solo sometimes, but I prefer having a co-driver. When the truck is rolling, anything that falls goes backward, not straight down onto the hazard switch. The only reason I'm talking about this next one is that I've finally graduated and don't have to walk those corridors anymore. This was in the summer of 2024, my final year of school in India. For 11th and 12th, classes ended around noon. I'm on the school badminton team, so we had practice at 5 p.m. in the school hall, a huge auditorium that also serves as our court. Most players arrive between 5 and 5:30, but that day a friend said he'd come early. So I went in at 4:30, hoping to get extra warm-ups and games in. We only have one court and training time gets crowded. At 4:30 the sun was still up, but inside the massive building shadows stretched long. After sunset, that hall gets oppressively dark and quiet. At that hour it was just empty. My friend wasn't there yet. I wandered the halls, peeking into vacant classrooms. An empty school feels like a different world, endless tiled corridors, locked doors, echoing footsteps. That's when I heard it, a distinct meow, a cat. The sound bounced down the hallway. Instantly I tensed. There are no animals in the school. Security is strict. Even we players need IDs just to get in. Doors are heavy and kept closed. No way a cat should have been inside. Naturally, I did the smart 18-year-old thing. I went toward it. Yeah, I know. I've watched enough horror movies to know better, but my brain was in practical mode. A stray must have slipped in somewhere and gotten stuck. I figured I'd shoo it back out. As I walked, the sound shifted. It didn't sound like a normal, sharp meow anymore. It felt distant, like something heard through a dream, clear enough to recognize but soft, detached from the space I was in. Still rhythmic. Meow, meow. The main corridor is huge, around 200 feet end to end. The sound seemed to be coming from the boys' restroom at the far end. I started that way. When I got within about 50 feet of the restroom, the air felt noticeably cooler and heavier, like stepping into a different room. I focused on the door, picturing a tiny kitten slipping out. Then it happened. Ankit. I froze. Not a cat. A human voice. Someone had called my name from behind me, back toward the entrance hall I'd come from. It was my friend's voice. The same friend who said he'd come early, but it didn't sound casual. It sounded strained, urgent and low, like he desperately needed me but was trying not to be overheard. Ankit, please come here. I spun around. "Rohan," I shouted. The meowing cut off instantly. Silence rushed in. I started walking back fast, almost jogging toward the entrance side of the corridor. Twice more I heard it, Ankit, each time a little fainter, like he was moving farther into the lobby. "I'm coming," I yelled. I ran the last stretch and burst into the main lobby by the lockers. Empty. No Rohan, no bags, nothing. "Bro, seriously, come out." "It's not funny," I called, my voice echoing. No answer. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring. "Hello, Ankit." "Where are you?" I panted. "Why were you yelling for me? Where are you hiding?" A pause. I could hear a TV and ceiling fan in the background. "What are you talking about?" he said, genuinely puzzled. "I'm at home. I'm just putting my shoes on. I haven't left yet." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're still at home?" "Yeah. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Why?" I hung up. I stood in the middle of the lobby, back against the glass doors, staring down both ends of the empty hallway. For anyone thinking I imagined it, my brain was locked onto that cat sound. That's what I was following. I wasn't daydreaming my friend's voice. There's no way I suddenly decided on my own to abandon that and sprint 200 feet toward the opposite end. I waited there, watching the hallway for what felt like forever. No one came until just after 5. Rohan walked in at 5:04 p.m. looking completely normal and blissfully unaware. It's the logic that haunts me. First, that hallway is huge. You don't usually hear a cat. If that's what it was, clearly from that far unless it wants you to. Second, and worse, just as I got close to the boys' restroom, where the sound definitely was, my name was called from the opposite end in my friend's exact voice. Something pulled me toward the restroom with one sound. Then when I got too close, or when it got bored, it used another voice, one I trusted, to drag me away. Those 20 minutes waiting by the entrance were the longest of my life. I sat by the glass doors, refusing to look back down the dark corridor. To this day, it's the creepiest thing that's happened to me at school. I don't know what was in that restroom. I don't know who or what called me from the lobby, but I'm sure they were connected. I love camping, but I usually stick to summer. Last winter, I decided to challenge myself, try a solo cold weather trip before the year ended. I picked a state park an hour from home. The forecast called for light snow and cold, nothing extreme. I packed everything carefully. Small tent, sub-zero sleeping bag, extra layers, food, stove. I arrived late afternoon. Snowflakes drifted down, settling over trees and trails. I chose a site near a frozen creek, liking the idea of the quiet sound of water under ice. The first hour was textbook. I pitched my tent, gathered firewood, and got a small fire going. By nightfall, the temperature dropped harder than I'd expected. Around 9, I crawled into my bag. My phone had almost no signal and low battery, but I didn't care. Disconnecting was part of the point. The fire died. The only sounds were the occasional groan of trees and the soft hiss of wind brushing snow. Around 1:30 a.m., something woke me. At first I thought it was branches shifting. Then I heard it again. Crunch, crunch, footsteps in the snow, slow, heavy, not right outside but maybe 50 or 60 feet away, getting closer. My first thought was another camper, maybe someone who'd gotten turned around. But I was nowhere near a marked trail. No one should have been there. I opened a sliver of the tent flap and peered out. Shadows, trees, snow. I told myself it was probably a deer or a coyote, but the rhythm was wrong. Too regular, too heavy, like boots. The sound would stop, then resume closer, careful and measured, as if whoever it was didn't want to be obvious. I decided to step out just enough to look around properly. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly unzipped the tent. The snow hissed under my boots. The footsteps stopped dead. I swept the beam across the trees, empty. My breath puffed white in the light. I told myself I was jumping at nothing. Maybe I'd been half dreaming. I turned back toward the tent. A branch snapped. This time much closer. 10 feet, maybe less. I went completely still. Running crossed my mind, but deep snow would slow me down and leave a clear trail. My gut said to stay put. I crouched and scanned with the flashlight, heart hammering, watching for any flicker of movement. That's when I saw it. A figure stood partly behind a tree about 20 feet away. A dark coat, a hood. That's all I could make out. My first reaction was disbelief. No pack, no visible camping gear. Who wanders alone through the middle of the woods in the middle of the night in winter? We stayed like that, me half crouched, him half hidden, for what felt like 10 minutes. It was probably less than one. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I slid my hand into my pocket and wrapped it around my tiny knife. It wasn't much, but it gave me something. Eventually, the figure moved. He stepped behind the next cluster of trees, deeper into the forest, and disappeared. The crunching of footsteps slowly faded. I didn't run. I waited, straining to hear anything else. When the last crunch faded completely, I retreated into my tent and zipped it tight. I didn't sleep again. I lay in my bag, flashlight in hand, snapping my head up at every imagined noise. By morning, snow was falling harder. I packed up quickly. As I headed back toward my car, I noticed small footprints between the trees near where the figure had stood. Too small to be mine. They came out of the woods and then simply ended, swallowed by fresh snow. I still camp alone in warmer months, but I won't do winter solo again. The idea of someone silently walking toward my tent in the dark, standing there, watching without a word, that thought follows me into every forest now. I don't know if he was a lost hiker, someone dangerous, or just a messed up prankster. I just know I wasn't as alone as I thought. I've worked nights at a tiny gas station for almost 7 years now. I've grown used to the hum of the lights, the locked doors, and the feeling that the whole world is asleep except me. Most nights after 2 a.m. are dead. Maybe 1 or 2 people stop for gas, cigarettes, energy drinks. Usually it's just quiet. This night, it was around 3:30 a.m. I sat behind the counter doing homework. My laptop screen glowed, the fridge behind me buzzed, cold air leaked from the AC vent above the register. It was that lull where nothing ever happens and your mind gets too relaxed. For context, I'm a 21-year-old woman, but I'm short and baby-faced. People often assume I'm still in high school. That night, I had on an oversized hoodie, hair in a messy bun. I probably looked like a teenager stuck on an overnight shift. I didn't hear him right away. I saw movement in the corner of my eye. A man on a scooter rolled past the front windows. Not a motor scooter, a little push scooter kids ride. He was moving slowly along the sidewalk. I barely reacted. It's a weird town. You see weird stuff. 2 minutes later, he passed again, this time in the opposite direction. Same scooter, same slow pace. But something felt wrong now. I can't explain it well. His posture looked off. Too stiff. Like his whole body was locked straight. I watched him without moving my head. As he came even with the window, his body twitched. He jerked his head up and snapped his gaze on me. His face made my stomach drop. Pale. Skin pulled tight. Eyes bulging, glazed like he hadn't blinked in a long time. He stared straight at me as he rolled past, unblinking. I sat up before I realized I was moving. He circled again and this time steered directly up to the glass. He didn't knock, didn't smile, didn't look drunk or confused. He just stared face blank. He planted 1 foot on the ground and eased closer until his forehead nearly touched the window. The scooter stayed under him, but his whole body leaned toward me, like he was trying to see past my face and into something behind me. Then he turned and walked toward the entrance, dragging the scooter beside him instead of riding it. The doors were locked. We closed the lobby after 2 a.m. and only do window service. He grabbed the handles and pulled. The doors rattled. He pulled again. Harder. Then with both hands yanking like he meant to rip them open. His expression never changed. Those eyes stayed too wide, like someone was holding his eyelids open from behind. "We're closed. Doors are locked," I called out, loud and steady. No reaction.